We're launching a new series of books, and hopefully, if they're successful, we will look at other producers. And we've started with Philip because critically his is absolutely the best. Those 3 years, that sort of early Tom Baker stuff, it's what sells Doctor Who to the world at large. It's what makes people, not just in Britain, but for the first time in America, sit up and go, oh, this is what Doctor Who is about. It encapsulates, I mean, there are brilliant eras of Doctor Who from the 60s and Barry and Terence in the 70s and lots of great stuff in the 80s and, of course, 21st Century Who. But the Hinchcliffe era, both in and of itself, but as a sort of little macrocosm of Doctor Who, is a fantastic thing to explore. So that's why we've started with Philip's era, because it's the one that, for so many people, whether they watched it in 1975 or whether they're watching it in 2023 for the first time, it launches a love for Doctor Who. I'm editing it, but the idea spurred on originally from Philip. And what we've decided to do is a series of essays. We thought it would be a boring idea just to review all of his stories or talking about the making of his stories, because as Philip has said, it's all been done before. So we needed to find a new angle. So what we decided to do was gather together some great writers from across lots of different generations who could write something new thematically on those stories. So for instance, I've got Mick Schubert, who's a science writer, doing an article on real science versus the sort of sci-fi science of Brain and Morbius, for instance. Trey Corte has done a fantastic piece for Face of Evil, looking at orthodoxy and religion within Doctor Who, focusing obviously on Philip's era. And it's a bit like, I've done short story collections where you get lots of different authors, all of who have very different styles, and you put them in a short story collection. And it's the same with this, is everyone's style is different. So I haven't tried to sort of make it a homogenized, oh, everything's got to read the same. Everyone's individual essays are very unique and very different. And then each of them is prefaced by a little piece by Philip on the story or on the same subject that they're talking about. So it makes the whole book new and refreshing and interesting, and isn't covering the same ground that's been covered many times over the years. In my head, I knew what I wanted from these essays, but actually reading them, I thought, oh, I've got what I wanted, but I've got even more. Sophia Morphew did this brilliant one. I asked her to do a piece on Hinchcliffe's use of old monsters, but she took that one step further. So you have the Wirren leading into the Sontarans, leading into the Daleks, leading into the Cybermen, and she found all these interesting little themes and links between them that after being in fandom for 45 years I had never seen before. And I read this and thought, this is really interesting, having someone new's perspective on this. And Robin Ince, I asked to do a piece on historicals, because his piece is from Ask Mandragora. So I said, do me something on the way historicals and history is used in Doctor Who. Well, he managed that for about 3 lines, and then it became this treatise on children's imagination and the way children perceive Doctor Who compared to how adults perceive Doctor Who. And it was all about the use of imagination and the TARDIS as being this fantastic entryway to kids' imaginations. And I read it and I thought, this is fantastic. This is a whole different thing than I had anticipated, and a sort of essay that I could never have predicted anyone would write. And these things have been absolute joys as they come in, because they're not what we expected, they're so much better. Graham Burke, who did the Sidney Newman autobiography, he did a lot of talks with Philip. They had lots of chats, it's probably about 20 hours worth of new material. And what's fascinating about that is, again, Philip and Graham are not talking the same old stories. They're actually having a conversation about everything that's ever been said about Philip Hinchcliffe's era. And so again, you've got a whole new perspective from Philip, a very 2023 perspective from Philip about stuff from the 1970s. He's almost answering the previous 30 years worth of articles and reviews that have been written. It's interesting because it's all new material and it's stuff Philip hasn't said before.